It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene with Scott Puryear. Now here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome to Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. I want to thank you for tuning into this podcast. It's a special one to me as we're going to talk Bass Pro Tournament Champions history with three of the tournament directors. So we'll get to that here in a few minutes, and I hope you'll enjoy that as well. We always start off the podcast with our what to watch this week, and we've got two or three things to mention there. Of course, the college football season officially wrapped up this week with Michigan winning its first title in about 30 years. They beat Washington 34-13 in the national championship game, Battle of Unbeatens. Congratulations to the Wolverines. They ran for about 300 yards on the ground, just kind of bullied Washington up front. But it'll be interesting to see now the fallout on the Jim Harbaugh and the sign-stealing scandal and other things that had hit Michigan throughout the season. So a credit to those kids and coaching staff that was able to fight through all the distractions there and pull off a national championship for the Big Blue there. So congratulations to Michigan. By the time this podcast comes out, Missouri State basketball Bears will have attempted to right their ship that's been taking on some water here of late. They've got Murray State on Wednesday of this week at home, trying to bounce back from just an embarrassing road loss at Bradley on Saturday by 20-plus, and then they lost one to a very average Northern Iowa the week before at home. So Bears need to try to get right. They will try to against, as we mentioned, Murray State on Wednesday, and then they are at Evansville on Saturday. By the same token, the Lady Bears are on a hot streak right now. They're 9-3 overall. They've won 6 in a row. They have Valley tests at Bradley on Thursday and Illinois State on Saturday. It's playoff time for the AFC West champion Kansas City Chiefs. They'll take on the Miami Dolphins Saturday night at 7 in the wild card round from Arrowhead Stadium. That game will be televised only on Peacock. So if you're not a streamer, it's a great chance to listen to The Cave here and on the Midwest Family radio stations, 104.7 The Cave, the home of the Chiefs games. You'll catch Mitch Holtis along with our very own Art Haynes, friend of the podcast, doing the pre- and post-game shows. One of 6 playoff games Saturday through Monday. So this is some good football weather. As our podcast guest mentioned, if you go to the Tournament Champions, you should be able to pick up the Peacock app in Great Southern Bank Arena, so you can double dip there. But Chiefs and Dolphins on Saturday night, 7 o'clock. It'll be a very chilly night at Arrowhead Stadium. If you're going, bundle up. And if you want to go, there's a contest going on right now with Midwest Family Radio. Tickets to the playoff game on Saturday night, go to aroundtheozarks.com. You can enter in a contest for a giveaway there for the wild card round playoff tickets, brought to you by Smouse Brothers Foundation Repair and Waterproofing. Thanks to Smouse Brothers for their sponsorship. Sign up, and then you could be there on Saturday night with 78,000 of your closest friends rooting on Patrick Mahomes and company on Saturday. Finally, we did touch on it there in the open, but it is Tournament Champions Week, one of our favorite times of the year. This will be the 39th annual Bass Pro Tournament Champions. Tips off Thursday night at Great Southern Bank Arena with 8 top-quality teams from coast to coast coming in. Nationally top-ranked Paul VI out of Virginia is kind of the headliner, but you've got 4 top 25 teams. Edmond North down in Oklahoma, coached by Scott Norris, the former Kickapoo basketball standout back in the 80s. His Edmond North team is a 2-time defending Oklahoma State champion. They're up to number 6 in the Max Preps top 25 poll and unbeaten. They'll be here. McEachern out of Georgia has a star named Ace Bailey that's going to Rutgers. He's the number 1 or number 2 player in the country by most accounts in recruiting services this year. McEachern will be a team to watch. St. John Bosco from California. You've got Vashon that wins a Missouri State championship about every year. Central and Glendale locally. Should be a great tournament champions. And again, we'll get more into that with our special guest coming up now. Pleasure is all mine today to have in studio here at Midwest Family 3 special guests. As we mentioned in the open, it is Bass Pro Tournament Champions Week, and we've basically got the Mount Rushmore of the TSC in here in studio today with Dr. Edsel Matthews, Mark Fisher, and Josh Scott. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in.
Pleasure to be here.
Yep, appreciate it.
Our count has this representing 36 of the 39 tournaments, counting this year's edition, which starts again on Thursday at Great Southern Bank Arena. Just kind of wanted to bring you guys in and have some sharing of memories of the TSC, of favorite moments, of kind of some of the challenges you guys faced back then. And I sure appreciate your time on this rather blustery day for coming in with the rain and the snowmageddon forecast that we've got out there. But, that represents Edsel with, I believe, 19 tournament champions. Is that correct, I think? And, Mark, you had about 13?
I think
the next
12.
12, okay. And then we had a couple there with Randy Stang and Jeff Starkweather. And, Josh, this will be your fifth, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Edsel, if you would, tell us kind of, the Cliff's Notes version of how this whole thing got started back again in 1985 and the behind-the-scenes work that created the Bass Pro Tournament champions.
I was sitting in my office one day, and Johnny Morris called me and said, I'd like to visit with you and bring Carol Robinson with me. He said, we are asked every day for fundraisers for everybody from the Springfield Public Schools. And he said, that's all I'd like to do one thing for the Springfield Public Schools. So when people said what, for their fundraisers, he says, well, this is what we do. He said, do you have any ideas? And he said, I'd like to keep it in the sports area. So we sat down and visited, and I said, back in the 1940s and early 50s, I said Missouri had all one classification, and they had the Tournament of Champions. And we had the 16 best teams in the state of Missouri, and people would save those dates to hope their teams would be good enough to be invited to come. And they would come and play at Missouri State, and it was the third week in January. And that it reached the point that it became more popular than the state tournament because it had the Bradleyvilles were playing the Parkviews, and it was playing the big schools, was playing the little schools. The Springfield schools was playing the schools in DeSmet and in St. Louis and Kansas City, but then we started to have classifications. And so the tournament champions, the state team at that time became more popular than the state tournament because the big schools were playing the small schools. And so MSHA passed a rule that you could not have a 16-team tournament anytime except over Christmas vacation. And so that made the tournament of champions, we had to drop it because it would go back to the 8 teams, and so it folded. I would like to start, and I told him, I said, we would like to start that again. And I'd like to get the best 4 teams in the state of Missouri we could get against the 4 state teams across the country. And we talked for it a little bit, and he said, I like the idea. And he gave us a nice little chunk of money and said, I'll take care of the advertisement. I'll take care of all the transportation to get them here, and I'll take care of the banquet and the trophies and that kind of thing. And so we went at that time. I had USA Today in the paper, and I went and wrote the top 20 teams in the country in the USA Today, and told them what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And the first call I got was from Father John Savage at Christ the King High School, and they were number 2 in the country, starting five juniors. And he said, we've traveled all over the country to play. We play in Florida, we play in New York, we play on the West Coast, but we've never played in the Ozarks. And what a blessing, because he was the right guy.
Oh, yeah.
And became good friends, and then they come back every other year, had the time of their life when they came here. And we treated them like kings when they came, and they came and won the tournament that year with great players. And the thing I remember most was when we announced it, it was the day about like today. And we started selling tickets, and we started a day about like today. And I went over about 5 o'clock, in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Game starts. The first year, I'm sorry. The first year, we just sold general admission seats. And I went over there, and we're going to start selling general admission seats at 8 o'clock in the morning on the first of January,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a day about like today, and there was a line from Hammond Student Center at the time all the way to Greenwood.
Wow.
And I walked up to the first, and I couldn't believe it because we started selling them at 7 in the morning, and I got over there about 7:15 just to see if there's anybody there and see if they're set up to go. And I walked up to the first person in line, and I said, "What time did you get here?" And she said, "I got here at 2. I rode the milk truck up from Mountain Grove at 2:00 this morning."
Wow.
And then we had the first game, and when you went there, where the people were taking newspapers and covering about 3 or 4 or 5 rows of seats, saving seats, and it's been full ever since.
Yeah.
And it sold out next year while we started selling reserve seats, and it just became a happening, and was very fortunate because we had the right team in Christ the King. Then we had Vashon out of St. Louis, and we had a team out of Kansas City, and then we had Glendale and Parkview. They were both good that year, and they were kind of our traditional schools that were really good at that time.
I think was Rogersville in it that year too?
Rogersville was.
She had good area teams as well.
And if it filled up and became a happening.
Do you remember if any of the other schools that you reached out to back then even responded, or was it just Christ the King? It's interesting now because now you get people knocking your doors to say, "Hey, we'd really like to come."
Well, the best thing that happened with that, Scott, was that Christ the King left here, and we didn't need any advertisement after that. We started getting phone calls, and we really after the first year, while people just started calling us from everywhere. And I think it was the next year. I believe it was the next year. Then, when Christ the King was here, I said, "I need another team like this," and they said, "Well, you need to get Alonzo Mourning in here," and he was in South Carolina, and we brought him in.
Yeah.
And of course, what a great deal that was, and it just took off from there.
And Mark Fisher, of course, you assumed that tournament director duty as part of the SPS athletic director role in 2003?
In 2003, it would have been the 2004 tournament.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think was key was you guys were reviving a concept, but you had to stay away from the format of the blue and gold because we already had a blue and gold, correct?
Yes.
And that was where the Christ the Kings and Alonzo Mournings and all that came in. And you ran the blue and gold in those early years as you're part of the Greenwood thing too. How big of a change was it for you running the blue and gold to running the TSC? And I'll ask Josh Scott the same thing, the current athletic director, the pressure that came with following up the traditions of the attendance and the stars and the teams after what Edsel had laid the groundwork for all those years.
Running the blue and gold, everything was pretty well local. So you were dealing with, 31 other local schools. With the tournament champions, it was, a lot of logistical type of issues, with the plane tickets, hotels, just with the selling of the tickets, whereas the blue and gold, was general admission. So, all those things. And Dr. Matthews was so helpful in the early years when I took over, and if I had questions, and he was one phone call away, and he stayed close, throughout this entire time, and he was one that gave you your distance, but he was there as a great resource. So I've always appreciated that.
And I think to you and Josh, both of you now, I mean, when Edsel was doing it, there was no internet. There was no way to go on and look up film of this player and this team, and national rankings were just USA Today. It's a little different now, isn't it, Josh, with the resources you have, but then also the challenges in different areas are greater too.
Yeah, that piece has to be exponentially easier for me as far as access and viewing of players. Probably the biggest struggle that I have or face on a yearly basis is player movement. And I'm not exactly sure if player movement was as dramatic as it is now, but unfortunately, the trend the last couple of years that I've been a caretaker of this event has been having to find at least 2 replacement teams a year.
That's the hardest phone call to make, isn't it? Is tell a team that you're invited, but you're really not invited now because and they know it too, don't they?
Yeah, and it's actually a little bit of an awkward dance that we do before they ever get the official invite. I let them know, hey, we're going to bring you in. We'd like to have you. I'm going to send you a contract, but I also want you to make sure that you note the disclaimer above your signature that if you have major player movement, we have the right to rescind the offer. And the one thing about this event is if you don't have the players, you don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And piggybacking on what Josh said, one thing I found about halfway through my tenure was the best players. Say, for instance, a school had one really good player. Then that player was getting picked off by the academies. And that's why one reason we went to the academies is because that's where all the players were ending up. And I remember we had Prestonwood Christian out of Texas, and they had 3 really good players. One of them was Julius Randle. And all 3 of those individuals got hurt. We still invited them because, I thought it was the right thing to do. But once they got here, it was evident that they didn't need to be here. And so at that point forward, we would always put it in the contract that if you had significant player movement, then we had the right to
go find another team. Yeah. Edsel, obviously Christ the King was big that first year, getting them in and getting them to come back. Then you had Alonzo Mourning, and I'm going to ask you guys about your favorite memories still today. Mine is probably that Anthony Peeler Todd Day final, and that year was right after the Mourning year, and you'd kind of established then that this is where you're going to find stars, and you're going to see guys that you're going to see go on and play at the Power 5 level and the NBA. Where was the point where you started realizing or trying to find the balance between good teams and star players? And was that the goal every year, was to have a mixture of both?
We usually when you have the good players, you have good teams.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so, I guess first let me say that I think that Mark and Josh have done a tremendous job of carrying on with it. And I think they've moved it to a different level. And I think, and I really compliment them and appreciate the hard work that they've done. And my starting with it and at that time and laying the groundwork was easier than the things that they're talking about now with player movement. Because at that time, what I had to do was probably find schools that had really superstars that were sophomores and juniors, and because they were going to be there then the next year or two.
Sure.
You don't go find a team that's got 5 seniors and just won the state, and hope they're going to come back. So that's I appreciate the job they've done, and it's a different time, different situation, but we have there's just been a lot of great games, but it's pretty hard to beat the Day Peeler game.
Yeah.
And it was a close game and 2 superstars. But I don't know what the numbers are now, but every year we've had NBA players that's gone on to the NBA, and one of the things that I enjoyed was people saying, I'm sure looking forward to watching them play on TV, and they're playing for Kentucky, and they're playing for Kansas, and they're playing for Indiana, and they're playing for whoever.
Well, and Fish kind of avoided the question just like he did when I used to interview him back in the day as Greenwood coach. But, the pressure that came with the SPS AD job has enough, I guess, headaches and many headaches daily and weekly with all you have on your plate before. But when you took the job, and Josh, when you took the job after Edsel had passed it on to you, Mark, how much pressure did you feel to uphold that tradition? It's a big deal now. And you look around, and I was thinking about this on the drive in this morning, is everything else sports-wise in our area has kind of hit a decline in interest and attendance, and I'm talking Bears and Lady Bears basketball. The Price Cutter Charity Championship golf tournament used to get 20 to 30,000 people, allegedly. I covered them. That's what we used to guess at. But even it's hard to get people out. The staying power of the tournament champions, was that a pressure thing? Mark, you first?
It really was, and I think that's a credit to Dr. Matthews and Carol because of the foundation that they laid. But, if you mess the tournament champions up, that's what you're going to be remembered for. You can do 100 great things in your role as an athletic director for Springfield Public, but if you mess up the Tournament Champions, that's what they'll put on your tombstone. And but again, I was fortunate because I had Dr. Matthews as a resource, Bass Pro as a sponsor, and they were so helpful. But I think the biggest issue was taking over. It had been around, maybe 20 some years or so. So like anything else, you're always worried about, has it run its course? And we were very fortunate with the new arena, because now we were able to do additional sponsorships. We were able to do things in-game, we were able to do some entertainment. And it just gave it new life. We were able to partner with Nike. We were able to partner with CBS. And so those things, it's almost like you got to keep feeding the monster.
Yeah.
And, if you don't evolve, then, as you said, then there's a chance where things may not look the same. And, we tried some things that didn't work. We tried some things that fortunately did. And so, again, I think you always, and Josh has done a great job of adding his, mark on it and keep trying new things. And so we're just fortunate in it. And again, you don't know if you're successful until you open up the gates and the people come in. And when there continue to be 10, 11,000 people in there, you're continuing to do things right.
Josh, you had like Mark had a window to watch the TSC right next door at Greenwood. You were up the interstate at Waynesville, and you knew the spectacle of the Tournament Champions. And 2018, I believe, was when you got hired as the AD, correct?
Yes, 6 years ago.
6 years ago. And in your interview process, I know you're probably asking or doing your research on SPS and all the things that come with it. How much of that in the back of your mind was, I'm going to be in charge of the Tournament Champions now?
Well, I had a little bit of a head start, not like Mark at Greenwood and being here in Springfield, but Waynesville had been in the TOC twice while I was teaching in it. Actually played, oh dang it, I forgot the name of it. The big-time player went off and played at Georgetown, but we upset him. Waynesville did in the first round. I think actually played Kickapoo maybe in the consolation.
Was that Greg Monroe?
Yeah, Greg Monroe.
Okay,
yep.
yeah,
that was one of those where now I feel a lot worse for Mark right now than I did when I was at Waynesville watching. I was like, this is awesome. And now sitting in a tournament director seat, you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened there with that? And then when we had Juwan Morgan, we played in and experienced it. But I knew what I was getting myself into it enough to make myself dangerous, but you really don't fully understand it till you're sitting in a seat and you're looking around, and it's just it's amazing. I don't like the word director. That's what's used all the time. I feel much more like a caretaker of the event for Southwest Missouri, and that's how we try to approach it.
Who was the first non-player or coach, I guess, air quote, celebrity to attend? Because I know, Josh, you had Carmelo Anthony last year, that, a whole nother set of circumstances where you're like, we got to make sure he's comfortable. We got to make sure people are leaving him alone, things like that. And then there was the specter of possibly LeBron showing up a couple of years ago. Edsel and Mark, do you remember who the first one? I know Roy Williams came one year. Was that probably the first time that you kind of went, we've just added another layer now with spectators that now we have to take care of when they come in? Do you remember, Edsel?
I don't remember. There was a time that we had every major university coach in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We set them on the front row in seats.
Uh-huh.
And
or up in that corner of Hammond's, I know there was that platform that you could kind of separate them from the crowd.
And probably everybody in the four-state area, everybody in the Big 8 conference at that time, they were here because the players were here.
Yeah. Mark, do you remember who?
Yeah, Roy Williams, he was in watching Tyler Hansbrough, and I just remember him being so gracious and signing autographs. Now, he wanted to be left alone during the game, but he said, after the game, I'll sign as many autographs as you want. Bill Self coming in to watch John Wall. You had John Calipari coming in. So, at that point, we hired Dan Brocker, a retired highway patrol
a beefy, bulky guy to fight people off.
And
right?
you know, Dan understood athletics.
Yeah.
And so he was perfect for that role, and it was not that we were worried about protecting someone, but just more about, you know, allowing them to watch a game, and so that was really neat. And you know, when you start bringing in then additional players like Josh has that have sons, then and, you know, and I think that just adds to the tournament. Now it may be a headache from time to time, but that's what people in the Ozarks, you know, they want to be able to see that, and so I think it's really been good for the tournament.
I just think back to when Dorial Green Beckham was doing his thing at Hillcrest, and Bob Stoops came in. Of course, I'm a big OU fan, and Bob was signing for everybody. Those guys that come in know that that's part of their public persona too, don't they? That, like Carmelo, I mean, you know, I'm sure he told the people no, but then he also took a selfie with a bunch of kids, and he endeared himself to dozens at that point, didn't he, Josh?
He was great. You know, he had a bodyguard there that was with him, just supporting him. We coordinated entrance and exit, and what I liked about him was he didn't just walk past. He would do some autographs, maybe not as many as everyone would want, but he did a nice amount, took some pictures, and then moved on. But he was gracious and wonderful, and it was awesome.
Brocker reminded me of the Bronny James security detail. Kind of just about, he would have fit in well with that group, wouldn't he? That year, yeah. Talk a little bit about, starting with you, Edsel. Once this thing got going, 5 years, 10 years, and the reputation was out there because people knew it was the way it was run and the quality of the teams and everything. The calls you would get from people then seeking you out to get in, and we'll continue on with Mark and Josh with that same question.
I think the biggest thing is that you can find a level of competition anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. But the crowds is what made the difference. I'd have coaches come in here and they'd say, you know, we can get this kind of competition in Florida over Christmas, or we can get this kind of competition in California. But we play before 200 or 300 people, mm-hmm. and with great teams. You know, it takes 2 or 3 things to make a really good tournament. First of all, it's a great facility, and Missouri State has been better, has always been a great host facility for us. I mean, they've moved their schedules and their games around so we could have the facility. And the second thing is you've got to have the great teams and the great players, and you got to have the right kind of players. You know, you don't want to bring in what I term as a hot dog or somebody that's, you know, that's all about me kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, you got to have a crowd, and it's the largest crowd in the United States for high school basketball that's not a state tournament finals.
Yeah. And the process changed with the invention of the internet too, I'm sure, didn't it, Mark, in terms of, and Josh, the people you could reach out to, but were your email inboxes being filled up with, hey, I got a player, I got a team, or you should call these guys? Was that starting to happen after the groundwork that Edsel had laid as well?
Yeah, really, it did. You had to be careful because not everyone, they may have a nice player, they may have a nice team, but they may not be the quality of the teams that we were looking for.
So or individuals.
Yeah.
Or they, you know, you do your background check on them, and they may not be a good fit for the event.
Yeah. We had one early come in and tear up the hotel.
Yeah. A team or player? Team. And they're obviously not back after that, right?
And they were told that they would never get another invitation, no matter how good they were.
I know that, Mark, you used to do this. I think you took Marty Marsh on several of these junkets, and Josh, you guys scout out all the time for the next year and the year after. Is it almost like shopping a little bit, Josh, to a degree? And are you everybody's best friend up until you announce the 8 teams?
Yeah, it's we get quite a bit of inquiries, but we've also been able to build almost like a circle of trust of people that are in different spots around the country, that when someone reaches out, we're able to have a sounding board to say, hey, what do you know about this coach? What about the way they play? How do they act? And so we have such a wide net right now.
So you've got some go-to people you can call and ask. And Mark, I'm sure you did too over the years.
We did, because in the early years when I took over, we were still trying to build those relationships. And the first call was to Christ the King, say, hey, so-and-so school is, we're trying to get can you make a phone call? And that's all it took. And bouncing back to an earlier question about this tournament, about getting the right teams, and what the event, why the event's different than any other tournament is. I used to tell the players and the coaches that if you can go anywhere to find 3 basketball games. If you come to the Bass Pro Tournament Champions and when you leave, the only thing you're talking about are the 3 basketball games that you played, then we've failed you. Because this is more than just 3 games. This is about you understanding the culture of Springfield and the Ozarks, and then us understanding, where they're coming from, like East Coast basketball or how basketball is played in the South or on the West Coast. So this is more than just the playing of 3 basketball games for each team that come in.
And that goes back to, I remember Edsel's stories about Bob Olivo and Father John and Christ the King coming back in the mid-'80s, and Edsel, you guys taking them out to your farm. Yeah. Coach Keltner arranged it, I think, Mike Keltner, and they saw their first cow patty, didn't they, down in the grass, and wondered what that was, right? So, I mean, it was more than just a basketball experience, and I'm sure that's something you probably have dozens of stories about the off-the-court stuff that happened in the early years.
We've had great honorary coaches here.
Yeah.
And they've taken them places. And they've taken them through Bass Pro Shops. And they've taken them, like you say, to farms. They've taken them to Branson to a show. They come in early one night and they stay a night later. And they'd go to Branson and for entertainment and a show. And that word gets around. And it's, it's become a happening.
I wonder now, Josh, especially in your era now, I mean, sports are different now. I mean, we have NIL, name, image, likeness, and we have colleges dropping bags of cash in front of kids before they've even played a college down, and they're not supposed to, but they do. It's the world we live in now. And Mark, this probably crossed over into your area a little bit too. Was there ever a point where teams kind of started wanting appearance money or hey, we'll come if you'll do this? And I don't think Edsel probably ran into that, but Mark, did you run into it?
No, we really didn't. The only thing we would run into maybe is if someone wanted an extra plane ticket or an extra hotel room, and depending on the circumstance or the case, and if we were able to do that, then we would. But I really didn't run into that. I'm not sure, Edsel, if you ever had that situation.
I did not.
Probably, maybe.
Josh is smack dab in the new world of sports now. Do you see that at all, or do you hear it?
No, we've not reached into that, but there's also an allure of our event where people want to be here and they understand what we do and how we do it. So I'm very upfront. Here's our package. Here's what we will do. If we have to negotiate a little bit on a plane ticket or a little bit on meal money, we can do that, but we haven't had that situation yet that you're talking about.
Are the shoe wars still a thing out there between the companies, and do they try to send teams, or do you have people you can go to with the shoe companies, or how does that work, Josh?
So one of the things that we've stayed loyal to is where we've been with Dr. Matthews and Mark, and that's just, we use Nike. Mm-hmm. And Nike is a huge partner to get the coaches and the teams and where high school elite basketball is. Nike still has a great mark on that, and we've not pursued anything else.
Yeah, I think that was one of our things when we moved into the new arena. We were able to secure a sponsorship with Nike and Tony Dorado, and it wasn't really about the product that we were getting. It was more about the relationships building with those Nike schools, where we could make a phone call to Tony Dorado and he could secure, some of his teams for
sure.
us. And really the neat thing about Tony and the relationship with Nike, they did not prohibit us from getting a school that per se that was with Adidas or Under Armour. We just didn't want 3 or 4 of those teams. So it's been a great partnership, and that really kind of helped keep the tournament alive also.
So I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. 2 years ago, we were coming out of COVID. A lot of events nationally were canceled, and Sierra Canyon was supposed to go to the Hoop Hall in Springfield, Mass, and it was COVIDed out, that event. And so there was a lot of talk that they would go to Springfield the next year and skip us where they were identified. But Nike and Tony is I fully attribute to Sierra Canyon and Bronny James team ending up in the Bass Pro.
So I guess we'll get to the favorite memories. I mentioned mine. It would always be the Peeler Day game, the way that Peeler was shut out in the first half, and then I think he had 3 or 4 steals in a row to start the second half, and 3 of them with dunks. The place just went nuts. But my other one would be the Bud Lathrop breakfast speech one year, where I think you guys wanted him to limit it to 10 or 15 minutes, Edsel, and Bud went on for it seemed like an hour, but that was Bud Lathrop, wasn't it?
That was Bud Lathrop.
There was no time limit on Bud Lathrop. But Edsel, what to start with you? What are your favorite memories over 39 years of this tournament?
I think that game is one that always sticks out in my mind. The game with Vashon and Christ the King, the first year, really stands out because it was a 49-48 game, I think, or a 48-47 game, and it was a game that, and then I appreciated some of the really, I appreciated some of the games where that the Hartvilles could come in and play, and I still get. I was still running into people from Hartville and the Nicholsons at Ash Grove, and come in and just say we appreciated the opportunity to play against these caliber of players. So I don't know. I just look upon it, and I guess whenever I was watching the games, it was hard for me to watch the games as a spectator. I was more concerned about the game. One of the things that I always appreciated, Scott, was our officials. And I always met with officials and fed them on Sunday before the tournament. And we'd sit down and we'd have a meal together. And I'd say, I'm not telling you what to call and what not to call, but we are going to all call it the same. And you're going to be bringing teams in here from all over the country. And some of them are used to certain kinds of officiating and some are not. And I want it to be consistent. And when they come in, I'm going to tell the coaches, this is the way the game's going to be called. And I expect you to call it that way, because we can't come in and be inconsistent from game to game. And the officials have done, I think, a really, really good job over the years of calling the game consistently.
Is there a Jordan rule? You don't foul out the stars? We got all three of you here.
That was never mentioned.
Never mentioned, Fish?
No, it wasn't mentioned, but I think just by the officials, they know that there's 10,000 people in the arena and they want to see the best players. A foul is a foul, but there's probably some leeway in there, and whether that's in a 7th grade game or NBA finals or the tournament champions. So our officials have used good judgment, and it goes all the way back to Coach Jim Vaughn and his association with the tournament, and now Kelly Holt. And
Josh, you'd admit this. It's hard to call, isn't it, with the athleticism that's on the floor?
This is a level that they don't see other than this time, which is why we're so guarded on the officials in the event. They do a great job, have a lot of pride in it, and I always think it is not. It's kind of unfair to officials in the fact of the better job they do, the less notice they're seen.
Absolutely. Mark, your memories?
Really, my early years was Tyler Hansbrough, his perfect game where he, made every free throw, every 2-point shot.
And that was a hard guy to call his games, wasn't it?
Yeah, because he would foul himself.
Yeah, it'd be like pass interference in the NFL. You could literally call Hansbrough about every trip down, couldn't you, for something?
He was probably my most favorite player to watch, just because he wasn't the most talented, but he played the game the way it's supposed to be played. And then I think, when John Wall came in, he was, number one player in the country. And then you had the ice storm in 2007. and then the Ball brothers. We caught them right on the forefront of what they became, and I remember, I think it was a third place game. It was the Ball brothers versus Malik Monk, and Malik had maybe 50, and one of the Balls had 42 or 3. And then as soon as that game was over, that was the first year we started the dunk contest, and Malik Monk came out from behind the curtains right before because we didn't know if he was going to be in the event or not. He came in and won the dunk contest. So just those types of memories, and it's not always about a game. It may be about an individual performance or something that happened during one of those contests.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention too the Teddy DuPay game with what 58, and Breakbill went for 42 or 44, and was the second story of the game there. But Josh, what about in your 5 years now? What are your favorite memories so far?
So I look at this and I'm realizing I'm doing something wrong because I don't know if I've watched a complete basketball game unless you add up all 5 years of them.
Fish had a staff of about 15 handling all
over the last. So I'm not sure that I'm doing it right. Mine are actually both just probably showing you the power of the event. We had Milton in a couple of years back, and they had an unbelievable team, and you don't usually see a team come in and play 6 kids at this national level competition. And Coach emailed me in March, and he said, I always reflect over the entire year at the end of it, and I wanted to send you a note to make sure that you all knew your tournament is the best in the country. There's nothing even close to it. And to get an email like that in March is huge. And I was talking to another team, Adam Danius from Link Academy, and I knew they were going down to the City of Palms, and I knew they were scheduled to play someone that I was interested in for next year. And this was first game of the year at Central. And I went to Adam and I said, I'd really like to ask you to do me a favor while you're in Florida. And he stopped me and he said, I want to tell you a story first. And I said, okay. And, I really wanted to ask you this question, but he started in, he goes, I was approached by another major basketball event, and the director wanted me to write an intro to his book about that event being the best basketball tournament in the country, and wanted to have our experience as, national champions. And I stopped him and I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but we've been to the Bass Pro, and that's the #1 tournament in the country. So unfortunately, I can't write your intro.
Wow.
And so when you hear stories like that, that's not me. That's not our staff. That's Southwest Missouri. That's the tradition. That's the fans. That's just what Mark talked about. That's going to big shots. That's meeting the honorary coaches. That's getting the wow. That's the fans wanting to sign autographs of kids that, the top 2 or 3 student athletes on those teams are getting autographs asked, but probably not everyone on the teams like is happening at our event. So it's just the overall treatment is different with us for 4 days.
And again, we're talking about memories. One that we need to mention, they're being honored in the TSC Hall of Fame this year, the Glendale victory in '94, and I had a chance to talk to Stu Stinger and Brad Forbacher and Coach Keltner about 30 years later now. What does that mean? And the 2 players joke that their wives say, "Oh, here we go again. They're going to be talking about that." But that's another one of those that local team wins tournament for the first time. I just got to think back, Edsel and Josh. There was a really good Greenwood team in the early '90s with Monty Marsh and Tad Penninger. Was that probably the biggest crime that they didn't get to play one of those teams? Fish, how would you have done in the TSC?
Well, Dr. Matthews said our team was good enough, but our coaching was suspect, so that kept us out. But here's what looking at Dr. Matthews and Josh, who's going to tell these stories, in the next 30, 40 years? It'd be nice if somebody with writing ability could write a book about the tournament.
It would, yeah. Maybe we can hook you up with somebody, okay, or somebody that's done the program for a few years.
I hear there's
with all your free time, that may be a project.
I hear maybe there's a kid in Arkansas that we could pay maybe spend some years with.
Yeah, the little one, yeah. Or when you're looking for your ball in the rough, I can just whip out a notebook and start writing a little bit more there, Fish.
Yeah, but that would be needed if somebody could tell the story from the beginning and keep this tradition
absolutely alive. Well, and again, the 39th Bass Pro Tournament Champions starts this Thursday night, the day this podcast comes out. Thursday, Friday, Saturday at Great Southern Bank Arena. Another great team, or great field. Josh, kind of give us a preview of what people can see this weekend.
Yeah, we're really excited. We have 4 of the top 25 teams in the country coming into the event. This year's a little bit different like it was a couple years ago. Everyone in the field will have the ability to play for a state championship in their home state. So we have number 1 team in the country, Paul VI, number 6 team, Edmond North out of Oklahoma, number 13, McEachern out of Georgia, and then we have number 25 team, St. John Bosco out of California. And that's not even touching the number 2 and 6 teams in the state of Missouri, with Springfield Central coming in at number 2 and Vashon coming in at number 6, who, Vashon about ready to go for their 3rd state championship in a row. So we have unbelievable team. Springfield Glendale is coming in. And then a team that's right now coming in under the radar, Rainier Beach out of Seattle, Washington, who is just now getting healthy at the right time. So I think some people have seen 4 losses and wonder why we're bringing them in, but I think their potential is going to be there. We have, I believe, 14 top 100 players. We have the number 1 or 2 player in the 2024 class in Bailey coming up from McEachern, and then a number 2 in 2025 with St. John Bosco. So we're going to have unbelievable basketball. I think the entire weekend will be riddled with close and competitive games. And we did do a check this morning. This is breaking news. The Chiefs game will be able to be streamed on your phone inside of Great Southern Bank Arena on Saturday night. So Peacock does play inside the arena on your cell phone.
Excellent. And will you tell the PA announcers not to give updates, right? Probably for those people that are trying to tape it.
Anyone taping it. Well, here's what I know about Rick. You can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him.
And in today's world, if you're taping it, I'm sorry. You're going to have too many ways to find out what's going on there. But Edsel and Mark, I'm sure you guys will both be there, correct?
We'll be there.
Awesome. Should be a great weekend again. I just want to thank all 3 of you. I go back to the mid-'80s and Edsel, and, of course, my time at Drury with Edsel and Mark, and just been a pleasure to work with all of you on the Tournament Champions and the other aspects of what we've done. And, Josh, continuing on with you and being able to do the program. It's been my honor to be associated with the Tournament Champions.
Thanks for everything you do to help us.
Thank you, Scott.
That's going to do it.
Thanks for all your help.
You bet. I appreciate that. It's going to do it for today's podcast. We thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.